All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Scott Peters. With nearly 5 decades in the plastic and mold making industry, Scott brings a powerful perspective that spans hands-on craftsmanship, leadership, and workforce advocacy. He's not only shaped molds, he's shaped mindsets, championing skilled trades, women in manufacturing, and the next generation of talent. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Well, I'm a third-generation plastics or tooling professional, so it's in my blood. If you cut me, I bleed steel chips and EDM oil. But, my mom was reading the newspaper as I was working on a shipping dock going nowhere, and she said, listen, you need to take this job interview. So I went down and interviewed for a job as an apprentice designer, and a good friend of the family who started a company that is now if not the largest, the second largest mold component supplier in the world, said, if Scott gets that job, he can go anywhere. Lo and behold, 50 years later, I have almost gone anywhere. It's been a great career and a great opportunity. It's something that I never dreamt of. And if you ask my dad, he was funny. He said, when we were growing up, if you kids get into the trades, I'll kill you. You're all smarter than this. I guess I was just faster than he was. But that's pretty much how I got into it. And the career path has just been phenomenal. Opportunities show up and if you apply yourself, people will let you do your thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, you've really seen the industry evolve over 50 years. So what's one shift that you never saw coming, and how did it change the game for mold makers?
Wow. So when I started in the trade, we were doing everything with patterns and true trace or decals, where you would set a master model on a follow board, pour an epoxy pattern, and then trace it into the steel. People said, oh, there's a new technology coming, it's NC, and we always said that was nuts controlled, because you had to be crazy to plug numbers into a machine and expect it to go where it was going to go. Soon after that was CNC. And if you ask me today, wire EDM was totally unheard of. I never thought it would work. And I can't imagine building molds without that technology at least available, if not in-house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about the power of storytelling. You and I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time together in a recent training program. So what about as far as recruiting younger workers? What's one story that you've seen or you've shared that really resonates with the next generation?
I find that the young people don't want to hear I did this stories or I did that story. They're more interested in understanding how the work they're doing is going to impact the society around them. When you tell a compelling story about this product was handled by a mold maker and a die maker and an injection molder, and at the end of the day, it's being used in a hospital setting to save lives, people can relate to that. They can grab hold of it and say, I want to be a part of something that affects society in that way. Now, unfortunately, our trade has not been really great about telling those kinds of stories. People look at us and say, oh, you work in a dungeon. We don't work in a dungeon. The dungeon days are long gone. Or you're a blacksmith. We're not really blacksmiths. We are creators. And there is nothing in the world, absolutely nothing in the world, that a tool maker, whether it's a mold maker or a die maker or a precision machine builder, didn't have their hands on before you bought it at Walmart. So that's
Absolutely.
the story.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy working with associations and going to their annual meetings, because you have a room full of people that are sharing their passion and the mission for what they do. Not that they're allowed to talk about money or compensation or anything along those lines, but that's really, it's not it when you're trying to recruit people. It is exactly what you said. How do you make a difference in reframing, going from we're just making a widget into something young people see as that mission driven work? And that's such an important story. What's one of your favorite stories when you really got somebody to understand the mission behind what you do?
It's one of those stories that I had a young lady that I was working with in China, of all places. She was a Chinese national, and she didn't understand why I would want to take her from doing piecework to doing something more value, added value, to a quality engineering position. And when I've got her to finally understand that there was no way she would fail because I was behind her 110%, and B, she was going to make a lasting impact on the company, it turned on a switch with her that you just couldn't stop. She
Mm.
became a sponge to learn as much as she could about that quality engineering function and how it impacted the goods and services we put out the door. Now, it's not tool making per se, but that's the kind of connection we have to make as leaders to bring people into what we do, to bring them into our world.
Yeah. And one of the things we hear about all the time, labor shortage, if we just really focused on bringing underserved communities and women into manufacturing, we could really avert a lot of that labor shortage. You've been around for a long time. What role do you see women playing in the future of manufacturing, and what's still standing in the way?
The mold making industry is historically male dominated.
Yep.
And we are doing things within the mold technologies division of SPE to knock down those walls. In a recent newsletter, we started a series of articles called Women Making the Mold. And we let the ladies tell their story. Because when you look around, there's a lot of guys out there cranking handles on the Bridgeports. You don't see a lot of ladies. Conversely, I've worked in shops where the women were either senior management, maybe owners, or were doing polishing. And when I questioned the shop owner of one shop, why do you have all women doing polishing? He said, because ladies pay attention to the fine detail. I'm a history buff, and so I like to think about people like Rosie the Riveter and how she pulled the American manufacturing site forward during World War II. Because the boys weren't home. They were off fighting the war. And were it not for Rosie the Riveter and her ilk, we would have lost the war for sure. They built more airplanes and tanks, and they did what they needed to do. But how do we get women into this industry? I don't have a simple answer. I wish I did. It'd be the magic pill that saves us all.
Yeah, I tell you, I speak at a lot of conferences, and it's been interesting to see the growth of the women in groups. When I spoke at Women in Manufacturing, probably in 2018 or 2019, I think there were 500 women in the audience. They have 2,000 women coming to their summit this year. You have the National Association of Women in Construction. I was just at the NSSGA, the National Sandstone and Gravel Association, and they are starting a Women in and sharing some of the stories that they're going through. This one woman, she's been a plant manager. She's third generation her whole career. She can have an 18-year-old male intern that she's walking around the plant. She'll introduce him to someone, and that person will address the child instead of her. So it's changing those perceptions and really giving credit. And it's funny too, because a lot of times these women, unless there are separate events for them to get together, if they see another woman at an event, they don't know if that's a woman in industry or if that's a spouse. And we need to make that more apparent as far as who's who there, so we can really start to connect with each other.
That's very true. And it also applies on the shop floor. And we have a young lady that we're using as our quote unquote track the apprentice. And she's starting her third year as an adult apprentice. She did 2 years as a youth apprentice. And she got started by going into a shop class, of all things, at her high school, wanting to take woodworking. She looked across the room, saw a CNC mill, and said, "What does that do?" And that was the start of her career as a metalworking professional. And she is just lighting the world on fire with her ability to do the job. You walk into their shop, and she was an apprentice of the year for the AMBA 2 years ago. So she's got her Kennedy toolbox. People look at her and say, "You're just an apprentice. Why have you got a Kennedy toolbox?" She did a good job and earned it, by golly. She's got her Track the Apprentice going on LinkedIn and other places. And those kinds of things, we hope, are going to break down the walls that say, "Oh, you're not a guy, you don't belong in this business, and you'll never perform at the same level." We hear a lot about DEI, and DEI, depending on which side of the street, has different acceptance levels. In principle, DEI is great, as long as we don't swing it too far one way or the other. As we swing it too far to the fringes, DEI is bad. It's bad when you swing it over to the right and everybody's saying, "Oh, DEI, oh yeah, that's exclusion, diversity exclusion, not inclusion." And then you swing it over to the left and you say, "Oh, DEI, it's really wonderful, and we're going to promote people based on things that are immaterial to the job." But we have to get people thinking that there is diversity in the workforce. There is equity for all members, all participants in the workforce. If you're doing the same job, you should get the same money. And we're going to be inclusive. I remember, and this is terrible to say, if you brought an African American into a mold shop and said he was going to be a mold maker, the guys would walk off the floor because they have no skill. That's a load of malarkey. Every apprentice mold maker has no skill. It has to be taught, whether it's male or female, African American or white, doesn't matter. It has to be a taught skill. But the key is finding people who have the ability to learn about diversity and culture.
And we think about things of how can we attract young people into industry. And there are programs, Bring Your Kids to Work Day, which is going to give them not only early exposure to the trades and manufacturing, but also giving mom and dad the opportunity to really show off what they do. But you know what? There are some safety concerns, obviously, around programs like Bring Your Kid to Work Day. So what are some creative workarounds that you've seen companies use to really spark the interest that we need, but to be able to do it safely?
One of the things that we do through the SPE Foundation is a thing called Plastivan. And Plastivan is a educational resource that will go to the school and help to educate the young people from 3rd through 12th grade and beyond what goes on in plastics. And it's a fun day that is spent with a Plastivan educator. They get to see that plastic isn't bad. If you watch the media, every time you turn it on, there's some poor dying seals or some form of sea life that's being critically impacted by plastic. But plastic isn't the issue. Plastic is inert. I've got a plastic keyboard on my desk. If I say jump up and down, it just sits there. But when I pick it up and throw it out in the backyard instead of putting in the proper waste receptacle, I'm the problem. So we want to educate young people that plastics and manufacturing careers in plastics and in tool making are viable and are good for the environment. We got to save the environment, but we want to do it in the right way. I know that one of our member companies, the PCS company up in Fraser, Michigan, just held their Take Your Kid to Work Day. They machine mold bases and they have a fully functioning warehouse and distribution center, and everybody had to wear hard hats and they had to wear safety glasses, and there were no open-toed shoes allowed in the factory. Those are all the things that you can do. And you have to have enough, let's say, parent or lead people from the organization to ensure that Johnny and Susie aren't wandering off in the warehouse. If you got 12 kids, you need at least 6 adults.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways we bring to machine shops. And they have to understand, so they have to go through a safety training before they go out on the floor. Basic safety training. You're going to see pieces of metal flying off of the end of an end mill. Don't touch it. It's hot and sharp.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. When you hear the crane beeping, it means somebody's picking something up and moving it. Get out of the way. But you got to make sure everybody understands you're going into a world where tons of steel may be hanging from a hook in the ceiling, and you don't want to be under there.
Yep.
I actually had an opportunity as an expert witness where a company was being sued for building a mold the wrong way because a mold maker in the molding room was taking it apart. Now, I feel bad for the guy, but he had it hanging from a hook, and he was beating on the side of the mold to loosen the cavity. He had taken all the bolts out. The cavity fell out, and it severed his arm from his body. And he thought it was the mold maker's fault, not his fault. Now, whoever would think, he's a 25-year mold maker, who would ever think that getting underneath a hanging mold block, beating on it, and hoping the cavity is going to come out would not present a problem?
Right.
Young people walking into a factory have no idea. So it's our job. It becomes incumbent on us to make sure we tell them where there's potential hazards. And we have to keep them out of those areas.
Yeah. So funny because I've had 2 things happen just in the last week. When I was with NSSGA, before I went there, I had the opportunity to tour a Martin Marietta limestone plant. And they had their guardian angel creed that basically, through my safety training and reading that, they told me, if you see something safe, you can shut down production. That's how much they believe. But then just today, I went on a plant tour with an association I'm working with this October in the fastener industry. And it was actually a safety walk where they had all of their safety directors and safety managers descend on this manufacturing plant here in Cleveland. And they were taking notes and sharing with the company the things that they thought that were good, but also some of the problem areas that they saw and some recommendations. And I think, wow, what a fantastic company for being vulnerable enough to invite 26 people to come in and judge you. But on the other hand, it's also a lot cheaper than OSHA coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Ohio doesn't have this, but in Kentucky, we had VPP OSHA, which was a voluntary protection plan of OSHA. And it was supported by the state of Kentucky Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Okay.
It was OSHA on steroids. So we had a safety committee that weekly had to go around. We made sure we looked for any slip, trip, fall hazards, any loose boards on skids, pallets, you name it. We were looking for it. If there was water on the floor, we had to get a yellow cone, put it on it, and then get the department manager over there to clean it up. And that was a weekly thing. Once a year, VPP came in and they would audit, almost like an ISO audit, our record keeping and the facility. So there's a lot of good things that can happen in safety. It's funny, when I was in China, we were a greenfield startup. And I walked in, and the managing director called me in his office and said, "We're going to become safety compliant with China's equivalent of OSHA." I said, "Cool." He says, "It's an ABC scale." I said, "Fantastic." He said, "We're going to shoot for a B rating out of the box," which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I walked into my factory, and the first thing I saw was my office workers walking around with open-toed shoes. Now, we didn't cut any steel. We were a molding and assembly operation.
Yeah.
But we had pallets running all over the floor. We had people pulling all kinds of goods from one warehouse to another. And the first thing I said was, "No open-toed shoes." Of course, my office staff was not happy. But when I explained why, they got it. So fast forward, China OSHA comes in. They gave us an A rating in my division.
Wow. Wow.
The managing director said, "How'd you do that?" I said, "I just made sure everybody knew how important it was." Because safety, like any other program, if it doesn't come from the top down, is never going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're trying to change the reputation of manufacturing from dark, dirty, and dangerous to safe, secure, and innovative, these are the things that we keep in mind and make sure that we're not taking those shortcuts, because one shortcut, the wrong shortcut, that can be fatal. And that's the worst phone call that any plant manager ever has to deal with.
I was there for all of 3 weeks and got a phone call in the middle of the night. One of my molding technicians had stuck runners into a granulator, and it jammed the machine. So he flipped the cover open, which is fine, and it should have kept the safety switch from engaging, but he knew how to push down the safety switch, and he reached in and took 3 fingers off. Fortunately, every member of the Chinese workforce is also a member of the Chinese military. And we had a former sergeant from the People's Liberations Army. He sent somebody up to the canteen. They got a bag of ice. He went fishing around in the granulator, found the 3 fingers, put them in the bag of ice, got him to the hospital. They put him back on. 6 weeks later, the young man was back working. What I did the very next morning was pulled every granulator off the floor, took the mechanical limit switches off, and retrofit them with limit switches that could not be overridden. And my maintenance manager says, "Boss, much money." I said, "1 finger, much, much money. These switches, cheap money." And that's what did it for us.
Yeah. Well, you know what, and we've talked a lot about the importance of communication when it comes to safety, why it's so important. If people know the reason why things are happening, they're more likely to buy in, but also from top leadership, because they are paying attention to what leadership is doing, not just what they're saying. So what are you seeing as far as a common communication breakdown on the shop floor, and how have you seen companies fix it?
Unfortunately, still in a lot of shops, the management sits in I call them their mahogany office, their mahogany box up in the front, because they've got mahogany paneling, and they don't come out on the floor to interact with the team. I made it a point every morning to walk around and greet every member of my then 80-person staff. Some I knew by name. And so I'd greet them in Mandarin by name. I couldn't ask them anything beyond that I'd ask their manager, how's his son? How's his daughter? How's his wife? But as time went on, I learned to speak the language, and that endeared the staff to me, and will do the same in any shop in America. If the boss comes out and you hear the staff on the floor say, "Uh-oh, here comes penny loafers," you know that they never come out of their office, or they don't come out of their office enough to not be considered not part of the team.
Right.
Penny loafers is a derogatory term. It's
Yep.
like saying, "Here comes Omar the tent maker." Penny loafers just means never see him. Don't have
Yep.
an interaction. When I went out on the floor, they were glad to see me, and I was glad to see my team. I think that's.
Go ahead.
Sorry?
Oh, I said
No,
that.
I think that's. We did it twice.
Yeah.
Go.
I think that there's a lot that you can tell just by walking through the plant and seeing and saying hello to somebody, because you can tell by their expression or their answer if they're having a good day or a bad day. And if they are answering in a way that is unusual for them, to stop and have that one-on-one human conversation of, hey, what's going on and how can I help? And that can be the reason why that person decides to stay instead of turning in their notice that day, because they actually feel that you care about them.
Absolutely right. I call it management by walking around.
Yep.
You don't, when you're walking around, don't be looking for team members to be doing the wrong things. Some wise speaker I know said this the other day on her podcast: what you recognize begets more of the same. Now, that's a Peter's paraphrase, but if you recognize your team doing good stuff, everybody around wants to do more good stuff, because nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. As a manager, as a leader, it's my job to paint the picture, whether in words or in a true painting, of what a good job looks like. And then to empower my team to do the good job, to cheer them on as they make small incremental improvements. And when they reach the goal, to celebrate like crazy, because that'll just make more. Yeah.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to a company that wants to partner more closely with Votech schools, but doesn't know where to start? Because again, coming from an aspect of trying to get a leg up on the competition and having access to those kids before they leave Votech schools, what have you seen that's working?
Probably the best one I saw was a mold maker in China who he was on the board of directors for the vocational technical school in Zhongshan. Now, when he would go to the school and he would look at every student and see not only are they learning, but what's their attitude towards learning. So he could pick the creme de la creme. The same is true for a fellow I know down in Easley, South Carolina. He goes to the Pickens County JVS, and he is part of their curriculum development. Not only the owner of the company, his plant manager, his operations director, all three of them are regular visitors to the school. They spend time with the students, they spend time with the faculty, and they help to develop a curriculum that is necessary in their community. As a result of that JVS, a company moved from Columbia, South Carolina to Easley, South Carolina for a new manufacturing site, and they are hiring students left and front center. But that's if you're not involved in it, you can't step back and say, JVS isn't giving me what I need. They don't know what you need. It's like being married and you go to your husband and you're all upset because he didn't do something the way you wanted it, or he's all upset because you didn't do something the way he wanted it, and neither of you communicated what it was you wanted. You can't be upset because your husband didn't meet your expectation if you didn't tell him what it is, nor can he be upset if you didn't meet his expectation. It's got to be communication.
Yeah, we have all failed mind reading 101.
Yeah, but we have perfect 2020 hindsight.
Yes, we do. It's interesting because talking about the emphasis on CAD CAM today and balancing teaching foundational skills with advancing digital proficiency. In the plant that I went today, they had brand new or newer machines, and then they also had machines that were 70 years old and still working great. But the skill level needed for those 70-year-old machines, one of the things he said is that kids coming in here today, they don't want to turn a wrench. How are you finding so that we can still get, because not that you couldn't get $1 million machine of today to last for the next 70 years, but with technology changing, they probably won't anyway.
You won't need to. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you seeing with the
So what I've
foundational
seen
skills?
in some of the training centers, one of them in Sturgis, Michigan, the Sturgis High School Training Center, they start in the 9th grade. Now, they don't let a young person set up and run a milling machine. What they do is let them take it apart and put it back together again. And they observe and they assist in the re-scraping of the ways so that this thing is like new when it gets transferred from the junk pile that came from some guy's shop into the training center, because they're going to learn how to run that machine. And they get to move into the next level and the next level and the next level. But being able to take apart a machine and put it back together is a skill set that it's a dying skill set, but it's one that is definitely needed. Whether it's $1 million new CNC today or a $5,000 knee mill from yesterday, that machine still has value. And the only reason it doesn't have value is when it's not maintained properly, when the ways are not re-scraped so that it doesn't track true. If you can take all the backlash out of it and put it back together, it'll be just like a new machine. I highly encourage to start with Machine Basics 101 and then build your way up to machine operations and then into CAD CAM.
So as we get to the end of our time together, what do you think is the one thing that industry needs to stop doing if we want to attract and retain top talent?
Stop relegating people to mundane jobs, period. Full stop. It's when you put people into a repetitive, mundane job that they soon burn out and lose interest. And when you lose interest in what you're doing, you're soon to walk out the door. Whether you're top, bottom, or middle talent, doesn't matter. The thing we need to do more of is to recognize, no matter what skill set they have, they're trainable. Hire for trainability and attitude towards trainability. Don't hire for the skill set. You can teach skills, can't teach attitude.
Absolutely. Wow, there was so much good information. I just want to thank you for sharing your 50 years of knowledge with us. So if people did want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably through my website, moldedmarketing.com, or through email, scott.peters@moldedmarketing.com. I'm 69 years old and I started a business.
Yeah,
That's what I do.
And what does Molded Marketing do?
We are manufacturers rep agency. So I work with companies around the globe doing tool making and product realization, factory automation. I provide consultative services. If somebody is having problems with their staff, I can come in and help. And sometimes I just do project management.
Okay. Scott, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Lisa, it's always good to work with you, and I'm glad we had this chance. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Sounds great. I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.